The Silent Miracle, the B-17 that almost won the war. December 20th, 1943. About 8,000 meters above the freezing skies of Bremen, Germany. The external temperature was negative 50 degrees Celsius. The air inside the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress bomber was a caustic mixture of oil smoke, gunpowder odor, and rarefied oxygen. The plane, nicknamed Ye Old Pub, was no longer an aircraft. It was a slow target riddled by over 1,000 bullets and shrapnel. The tail had been virtually severed. The plexiglass nose was shattered. 9 of the 10 crew members were wounded. The tail gunner was dead. At the Luftwaffe Air Base in Jever, the combat routine was a machine of precision. The fighter pilot Oberleutnant Franz Stiegler took off in his Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6. Stiegler was a veteran with 27 registered victories. For him, shooting down an American 4-engine, a B-17, was brutal but necessary work. Stiegler, at that moment, viewed the American daylight bombing campaign as a costly arrogance. Stiegler's speech, Technical and Focused Voice, Radio Interception Excerpt, 1943. Another procession of flying coffins. They come in formation, relying on their armor and their stupidity. There is no honor in taking down an invalid, but the job needs to be done. The goal is the count. The Luftwaffe underestimated American tenacity. Stiegler ignored the fact that this particular encounter would break the code of war he had sworn to follow. The American project was one of industrial destruction through precision. The B-17 was conceived as an autonomous bomber, a fortress armed with 10-50 caliber machine guns capable of defending itself without escort. The baptism by fire of the daylight bombing campaign proved the critical failure of this doctrine. Exposure. Flying alone in broad daylight at altitudes up to 9,000 meters exposed the B-17 to the relentless attack of German fighters. Loss rate. The B-17 loss rate was unsustainable. On Black Thursday, October 14, 1943, 60 aircraft were lost in a single raid. Crew morale was in technical collapse. Ye Old Pub, piloted by 2nd Lieutenant Charlie Brown, 21, was the living proof of this failure. The mission to bomb the Focke-Wulf aircraft factory in Bremen had turned into a desperate fight for life. Damage report. Lieutenant Charlie Brown, post-mission, reconstruction. We lost one engine. Another was malfunctioning. The hydraulic system destroyed. Flaps inoperable. The plane was falling. Only the strength on the manual controls kept it airborne. The smell of burning was unbearable. We were finished. The transformation of perception and the last combat. Franz Stiegler intercepted the B-17 covered in snow and blood. He saw through his glass canopy the massacre. He prepared to fire. The B-17 was defenseless. But as he closed in for the coup de grace, Stiegler saw the dead tail gunner. He saw the desperation and youth in the eyes of the pilot, Charlie Brown, who could barely keep the plane level. In that critical moment, Stiegler's code, forged in his childhood, and the Luftwaffe rules of honor, imposed by his former commander, overcame the Nazi code of war. Stiegler recalled a phrase, "If I ever see or hear of you shooting a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself."
The B-17 would not win the war with bombs, but with an act of humanity under the hell of combat. Franz Stiegler, the German ace, put his finger on the trigger, but instead of firing, he did the unthinkable. He chose honor over victory, and the B-17, stained with blood, flew north, carrying a secret that would take 40 years to be revealed. The protagonists, honor and inexperience. The pilot of the B-17 Ye Old Pub was 2nd Lieutenant Charles L. Charlie Brown. At just 21 years old, though he lied that he was 24 to earn his crew's respect, The mission on December 20, 1943, to bomb Bremen was the first combat mission for his young crew. He was a rookie, thrown into the deadliest environment of air warfare. Brown was a man raised on a farm with a methodical determination. His B-17 was assigned to what veterans called Purple Heart Corner, the most vulnerable position on the edge of the bomber formation, a spot that German fighters systematically attacked because it was the easiest to isolate. The technical and physical chaos. The failed Bremen mission transformed the old pub into a flying ghost. Damage. The bomber took hits from flak, anti-aircraft artillery, and was subsequently attacked by over 15 Luftwaffe fighters. Engine number 2 was inoperable. Number 4 was malfunctioning. The hydraulic and oxygen systems were destroyed. Casualties. 9 of the 10 crew members were wounded. The tail gunner was killed. The morphine syringes for the wounded had frozen. Collapse. Brown himself was wounded in the shoulder. He briefly passed out due to blood loss and altitude. The plane dangerously dove. Upon waking, he was only 3,000 feet from the ground, fighting to maintain manual control of an aircraft that technically should have crashed. Brown's crew was alive by pure statistical miracle.
Franz Stigler, the Ace and the Code of Chivalry. On the German side, the pilot who took off in his Bf 109 G6 was Oberleutnant Ludwig Franz Stigler. With 27 registered victories, Stigler was just one victory away from receiving the Knight's Cross, the Reich's highest combat honor. But Stigler was an atypical man in the Luftwaffe of the time, a fervent Catholic and a traditionalist soldier, averse to Nazi fanaticism. His combat philosophy did not come from Goebbels, but from his former instructor. The Oath of Honor. Stigler carried a non-negotiable code instilled by his commander, Oberst Gustav Rudel, during the desert campaigns. "If I ever see or hear of you shooting a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself." Rudel added, "You fight by the rules for yourself, not for your enemy. You fight by rules to maintain humanity." For Stigler, war was a duel of honor, not a massacre.
The interception, an act of mercy. After landing to refuel, Stigler received the order to intercept an isolated B-17 flying low. The target was the ye old pub. As he approached, Stigler did not see an enemy. He saw a tragedy. Visual inspection, technical and shocking. Stigler flew alongside the battered aircraft. Through the holes in the fuselage, he saw the internal damage, the mutilated tail, the hanging machine guns, the blood covering the fuselage. He saw the pilot, Charlie Brown, in the cockpit, fighting against the ice and exhaustion. The ethical conclusion. Stigler remembered his instructor's words. Shooting down a defenseless B-17 with a wounded and unarmed crew would be the same as shooting a man in a parachute. There would be no honor in the 28th victory. Stigler, instead of firing, positioned his fighter parallel to the B-17. Brown's co-pilot, Pinky Luke, saw the Bf 109 and screamed, "My God, he's going to destroy us!" But Stigler did not fire. He gestured. 1. Order to land. He tried to signal for Brown to land in Germany, where the wounded would be treated, an offer refused by Brown, fearing a trap. 2. Sweden, neutral alternative. Stigler then pointed in the direction of Sweden, the nearest neutral territory, a flight of only 30 minutes. Brown, stunned and afraid of a German trick, did not understand the gesture.
Stigler made the final decision that defied martial law. He positioned his fighter above and alongside the right wing of the ye-old Cub, escorting the crippled bomber over the last line of German anti-aircraft defense on the coast. With the presence of the Bf 109, the German flak batteries on the coast did not open fire, a safety protocol not to shoot down friendly fighters. Stiegler involuntarily transformed into the B-17's protective escort, guiding it out of enemy airspace. 3. Repercussions and the imposed silence. After Franz Stiegler's escort, the ye olde pub limped across the English Channel. Brown, fighting against what little remained of his control system, managed to make an emergency landing at a base in England, far from his home base in Kimballton. The landing was a miracle of piloting. The bomber looked more like a flying sieve. Only the tail gunner, Hugh Eckenrode, had been fatally hit. The rest of the crew survived, though seriously wounded. Charlie Brown and his crew were subjected to rigorous interrogation. Brown reported the attack, the condition of the aircraft, and finally, the unthinkable gesture of the German ace. The reaction of the Allied command? Harsh and institutional voice. The command of the U.S. 8th Air Force was alarmed. The story of German chivalry, of the humanity demonstrated by a pilot of the Reich, was dangerous propaganda in wartime. High Command Order. Brown and his crew were given an immediate and strict order: total silence. They were instructed to never reveal the story of the German pilot, under the risk of glorifying the enemy and undermining the morale of other crews. The B-17 had returned. The story of honor was buried. Franz Stiegler, upon returning to his base in Jever, knew that if he told the truth about sparing a defenseless B-17, he would face a court-martial and execution for treason. Stiegler lied in his report.
Stiegler's report. Dry voice. Fictional excerpt of a technical account. Shot down the four-engine bomber over the North Sea. Debris confirmed. Crash into the water. He obtained his 28th victory, but the moral weight of the secret was the cost of his survival in Hitler's Reich, where honor had been totally replaced by fanaticism. Stiegler continued to fly, achieving 30 confirmed victories by the end of the war. However, the crippled B-17 remained the victory he could not accept and the secret that haunted him. The weight of the secret and the 4-decade search. Charlie Brown continued to fly, completing his 28 missions. After the war, he worked for the U.S. Department of State in intelligence, but the memory of the Bf-109G6 beside him continued to be a recurring nightmare. Franz Stiegler. After the German defeat, Stiegler feared Allied retaliation for his reputation as an ace and political persecution. He emigrated to Canada in 1953, becoming a successful businessman. Both men carried the secret for over 40 years. In the late 1980s, Charlie Brown could no longer bear the weight of the imposed silence. He needed to find the man who had spared him. Brown dedicated himself to a personal intelligence search. 1. He wrote to German fighter pilot associations and military publications. 2. His technical search was for a Luftwaffe ace who was near Bremen on December 20th, 1943, and who had reported shooting down a B-17 without having material proof. Brown's perseverance was the same determination that had kept him airborne with the ye olde pub. Fate, which had toyed with them in the skies over Germany, was about to reunite them in North America. The letter that broke the silence. In 1990, Brown received a letter. The sender was Franz Stiegler in Canada. Stiegler not only replied, but provided critical details of that day that only the German pilot could have known: the color of the smoke, the exact condition of the tail,
the position of the wounded. I flew alongside you. Shooting you down would have been the same as shooting a man in a parachute. There is no honor in fighting a disabled man. The B-17 had almost won the war, not with bombs, but with the capacity to provoke an act of mercy.
4. The reunion. Friendship in the sky and on Earth. The psychological toll. For 4 decades, Charlie Brown, the former B-17 pilot and later intelligence officer, was haunted by the face of his enemy/savior. The silence imposed by the Allied command regarding the enemy's humanity was an open wound. In the late 1980s, Brown, retired and living in Florida, began the final search. He used his intelligence contacts and finally paid for a classified advertisement in a German fighter pilot magazine with the brief message, "I am seeking the pilot who spared my life on December 20th, 1943. The Vancouver phone call. The answer came from Vancouver, Canada. Franz Stigler, who had immigrated and become a successful businessman, read the ad. He immediately called Brown. Charlie Brown, account of reunion, emotion. I asked, "Was it you? Why didn't you shoot?" Franz Stigler, response of honor. "I couldn't. Shooting you down would have been the same as shooting a man in a parachute. There was no honor in that. There would never be honor." In 1990, 47 years after their encounter in the skies over Bremen, Charlie Brown and Franz Stigler met for the first time in a hotel in Seattle, Washington. The meeting was the opposite of military protocol. The two men, now elderly, embraced and wept. The emotion was overwhelming. Stigler revealed to Brown that the story had been a war secret and that he had falsely reported the shoot-down to protect his own life. The crew reunion. Brown and Stigler soon expanded the friendship to their families and the surviving crew of the Ye Olde Pub. The gunner, Sam Blackford, and other crew members reunited with Stigler, realizing they owed their survival not to luck, but to the chivalry of an enemy.
The legacy, a higher call, and the shared destiny. Brown and Stigler became inseparable, traveling together to military events and conferences, telling their story. Their objective was to redefine the narrative of war, showing that humanity could transcend ideological conflict. The book, A Higher Call, by Adam Makos, immortalized the episode. The Last Flight. Fate, which had united them so improbably in the air, sealed their pact on the ground. Franz Stigler died in March 2008 at the age of 92. Charlie Brown died 8 months later in November 2008 at the age of 87. Both passed away from heart attacks. They said goodbye to life with the same proximity as they had said goodbye to war. The story of the B-17 Ye Olde Pub and Franz Stigler's Bf-109 G6 is not just about the honor of a German pilot. It is about the moral courage to choose compassion in a system that demanded extermination. The B-17 did not win the war with the bombs it dropped on Bremen. It won it with the silent miracle of its survival, proving that, in the hell of air warfare, the act of mercy was the noblest victory of all.